All right. So we learned yesterday that Trump tax cuts paid for themselves. The Laffer curve worked. The Laffer curve worked. The establishment was wrong, and we were right. And joining us now to crow about it is my great pal Steve Miller, former White House senior policy advisor and now founder of America First Legal. Put your economic hat on, Steve Miller. I know you got one stashed away. You always do. I mean, all this news comes out. The Congressional Budget Office was completely wrong. The Trump tax cuts, particularly the corporate tax cuts, paid for themselves and then some, wound up making money for the government, which may not be a virtue. But I'm just saying, all these geniuses in Washington were completely and totally wrong. It brings joy to my heart. What you think about it?
Well, and I say this with all due respect to our friends at the Congressional Budget Office, but the CBO hasn't been right about taxes, at least in my lifetime, Larry, and maybe even in your lifetime, which is really saying something. But supply-siders have always known, and you've preached it for decades, Larry, if you tax production less, if you tax work less, if you tax the part of the economy that creates wealth less, you end up with higher revenues. You end up with more cash coming into the federal government. And of course, that's exactly what we saw with the Trump tax cut, especially in an economy in which companies can come from anywhere in the world into the United States, or they can leave the United States and move to anywhere in the world. Just as surely as a company can go from California to Florida, they can go from the United States to countries all across the planet. Lower taxes in America means more wealth in America, it means more revenue in America, it means more jobs in America. That's the Trump formula. That's what worked.
Yeah, and higher wages, too. I mean, the interesting thing here, Steve, is the CBO and the Joint Tax Committee and all these establishment, you know, all the fiscal people, the Brookings Institute, there's a whole lot of them. You remember, they argued against us, hammer and tongs. Argued. It's going to blow a hole. Biden continues to lie. Biden says the Trump tax cuts caused a big deficit. It's a complete, I mean, it's just factually incorrect. That never stopped Biden before. But I'm just saying the establishment was wrong. So Art Laffer was right in terms of his Laffer curve theory. Lower tax rates, stronger growth, less avoidance, more revenues. All right, we have a picture of the Laffer curve up on the full screen. Lower tax rates, higher revenues. In fact, Steve Miller, I think the revenues are so high now, we've gone all the way back to something like 2015. But the point is, when the libs anytime conservatives want to cut taxes, people on the left scream about, oh, deficits are terrible, deficits are terrible. But anytime the left wants to spend money, then the media says, oh, that's great, it'll stimulate the economy. Okay, so that's their paradigm. What do you think about that? Did we break that paradigm?
Well, as a logical proposition, Larry, and you know this as well as anybody, tax cuts cannot create deficits. Only government spending can create deficits. The government does not own your wealth. The government does not own your property. The government does not own the sweat of your brow. All of that belongs to you. The government then takes a portion of it through taxes, and then that's what they have to spend. And anything they spend over that is a voluntary choice made by Washington lawmakers to spend more than they are taking in. And we can have a different debate about deficits and about borrowing and about interest rates and everything else. But government spending, and government spending alone, is the reason for the United States crippling debt.
Yes, it is. And also the inflation. And also the big slowdown that's going on.
Yes.
Steve Miller, in the remaining even Joe Biden, I think, has carved himself or dug himself into an incredibly deep hole with this Title 42 business. I mean, I don't know, about a third of the Senate Democrats are now rebelling against that without judging the merits of their legislation.
Hole.
Yeah, I mean, he's just so stuck. There isn't hardly anybody outside of a few far lefties that are defending this. So what do you make of it?
He is in an abyss so deep, a chasm so large on immigration, that if Republicans will just seize upon it, if they will lean into it, talk about it every single day between now and the election, this will be a red tsunami. Not a red wave, a red tsunami. You will see a clobbering the likes of which you've never seen before, because we have inflation, we have crime, we have surging energy prices, broken supply chains, crazy woke agendas in our schools, but you add on top of that the worst illegal immigration crisis in the history of any country. The party, the Democrat Party, will be in tatters. Seize on it, talk about it every day.
You know, it's fun. It's so bad, you know, inflation, crime, and this border story. With, again, it's like, I don't know, a quarter to a third of the Democrats in the Senate are walking away from that. I thought it was amusing. I guess he told former President Obama that he was going to run for re-election. Joe Biden running for re-election. And I'm just curious, you have to run on something, right? I mean, he's going to run for re-election on what?
Well, I'm not sure that Joe Biden really knows what's going on a day-to-day basis. But what I would say to you, if I had to guess what's really going on here, is they're just trying to push that out there to try to kill the narrative that he's a lame duck. But everyone knows he's a lame duck.
I'm afraid so. Because you know what, Steve? You're right. The cavalry's coming. It's going to be a red wave. But I agree. You're saying the GOP should really keep this border drumbeat going.
Keep it on the front pages. Don't let it fall away, because if you do, you will win a majority that has never been won before.
Yeah, I like it. I like the sound of it. The cavalry's coming. Steve Miller, thank you, buddy. Talk soon.